Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of My Child, My Voice Parent Connection show. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad that y'all are back here. I'm back to be alive over here. And I'm saying alive because I just recently went skydiving, so I have to say that out loud. My name is Wendy Gonzales-Neal. I'm the executive director and founder of My Child, My Voice here in my hometown of Houston, Texas. And I'm also the Texas delegate for the National Parents Union, who this show is brought to you by. And our show is here to connect parents and caregivers, with information and resources that you need to help your kids, education. And so I am so excited about my next guest. I've had the privilege of working alongside with her when it comes to education and it comes to resources for our parents and our students. My next guest is Patty Williams-Down. She is the executive director for One Goal here in Houston. And her very important job is she's also a mom. So let's welcome Patty up here. How you doing, Patty?
I am well. This is so great. Thank you so much for having me. And I also cannot wait to talk to you offline about skydiving.
I've been getting that a lot recently. Now, I've had the privilege of working with you at a public charter school called Yes Prep, and we've had some great, times there. But there are a lot of us that don't know who you are. So can you tell us who you are and, and a little bit about One Goal, but mostly your very important, job as being a mom?
Yeah. So Patty Williams-Down, as you said, I am an educator, I am an executive, and really an equity builder. I fight for educational equity in my spare time, when I'm not parenting three amazing children, 14, 5, and 9 months. We had we didn't have a quarantine baby. We actually found out right before the whole world shut down, which was a whole thing. We were like, this is going to be an interesting year. So we have a 9-month-old. But I would say a part of my conviction towards the work of educational equity, which I know is can feel really jargony, but it's essentially saying that education should work with its constituents, not to its constituents, meaning your educational experience should be done with you. You should be a co-conspirator, you should be a co-constructor, and you should feel co-powered to design the systems that work best for you and your family. You should have choice and options and feel really clear-eyed on what's going to work best for you. And so that comes from my own background. So I am from an underserved area in East Orange, New Jersey, that, within our context of Houston, it's similar to Third Ward, which is an incredibly enriched area, but has suffered some real economic blows. And what that does is it creates, cycles of undernourishment. And that can feed into educational access that is not available to students. Right. And so I experienced that firsthand growing up in East Orange, where I had an incredible community. I had people who would give their last dollar to support me. So I understood what loyalty and commitment meant, but I also understood scarcity because we didn't have a lot. And so I knew that I didn't want any kid to feel like they had to really work, twice as hard for the access to educational equity that is guaranteed to you as, someone who lives in our country. And so I always knew that I wanted to obliterate systems that didn't work for kids and didn't work for families. And so I started my journey as a teacher. And then, and literally everything I've done has been to say, how can I do more for kids who deserve a whole lot more? And so once I became a parent, that was a whole different job. It was different being a professional and then being a parent. Everything was so personal. And it was, I was like,
we're also that way. Once you have those kids, right? When you have your kids, everything changes. You're like, oh, I've been fighting for this. Now I'm really going to be fighting for this because now it affects my kids' education.
Yeah. Now it's accelerated. It's on steroids. I was like, oh, and what was interesting, Wendy, is that we used to live in the Houston Independent School District. We live out in Fort Bend County. now. But we lived there when my son, who's now 14, was entering elementary school. And we didn't really want him to attend our neighborhood school, because what we saw from the school wasn't that it didn't have adequate services, but we didn't see like them wrap themselves around the whole child. And we wanted that. We wanted a neighborhood feel. We wanted access to programming. What we didn't want was to have our kids sort of learn how to take a test. And that's what our neighborhood school was affording in an educational experience. Mm-hmm. That's not what we wanted. So as an educator, I felt really good about like, oh, I can see this. I can assess what's going on and I'm going to figure out a different pathway, right? Like I was like really indignant about it. It was the hardest process ever to figure out then where does he have other viable options?
Exactly.
And it was so humbling because I was like, I do this for a living. And this is challenging. But what I also felt really inspired about was seeing how many other parents were so convicted about joining their kids' experience who weren't educators. And they were just as zealous and just as approached it with fervor. So you're right. Everything changed, I think, in my professional life when I had to be an advocate for my kids.
That's very true, because it does change. And then for me, I didn't know anything about choice, to be honest. I just knew I had to find a better fit school for my youngest son, because my other two, his older siblings were about to go out the system, but he was still in there where I needed to find something better because he was struggling, And where I live, I'm on the outskirts. At the time I was in Northwest Houston, but I was still in the outskirts, and there's not much choice. I mean, I had to drive far just to get to a school. I mean, Houston does have choice. I will say that. We have everything that you can think of. You have a variety, but it's like, well, how do I get there? And how do I apply? And what type of school is this? I have no clue, because I didn't know what a public charter school was at the time. I was like, all I heard was, hey, we're sending our kids to college. And I'm like, I want that for my kids.
That sounds great.
But I did ask a lot of questions. I, was one of those parents. I just had it was funny because I had the principal, and the principal, Mr. Golden, at the time. He's like, well, you ask a lot of questions. I was like, well, I want to make sure this is the right school for my son.
Yeah. And I think you just mentioned something that I think is, and I can talk about this in context at a different point as we continue to talk, but how do I show up as a parent for my child in their educational pursuits? Like, what do you do? I think what you just said is such a gem, and I'm sort of going to repeat it and rephrase it. I first had to learn my child. Mm-hmm. Right? Because it was only then that I can understand, oh, I'm looking for places that fit him.
Exactly.
And that's what you were saying. You're like, I have a lot of questions, but it was because you understood your son. You understood like, hey, I have some kids. I've learned who they are. They're very different, right? And they need different things, which is equity, right? It's like systems should be designed to meet kids exactly where they are for who they are and bring out the very best in them. And I would say that's my number one rule is now having 3 in completely different points of their lives. My parenting in sort of the most accessible way has been, I am just going to learn who God is trying to help you become. Not who I want you to be, not who I expect you to be, but exactly who you are. So my son, he loves science and technology. He could care less about reading anything above 5 pages. He hates it. Social studies, big text, novels. He's like, Harry Potter, why would I read this? Like, why would I spend my time with this, right? Meanwhile, our daughter is this avid reader. She's like, I need someone to read a book with me. And then a book turns into like 5 and we're an hour into bedtime. But they're different. And so my husband and I have been trying to, in our family, it's like, well, just who are they? Okay, we're just going to keep buying our daughter books. Exactly. She's going to love that. That's what we're going to do. And our son really loves gaming. And what we understand about him is he likes to understand the games. And I'm like, there's a whole lucrative industry designed just for you.
Exactly. There's so much. And I mean, each of our kids are their own individuals, right? Each one was different. I even had my niece come live with me. And that was a shocker for me because she was dyslexic and we didn't know. And for us to go to the school that the school is supposed to help, with our kids, didn't have a clue either. They actually misdiagnosed her. Yeah. It took another person that I was talking to, another mom, that says, you need to get your kid tested. I'm like, oh, Wow. And then I got my niece tested, and everybody thinks she's my daughter because she looks like me, but she's my niece. I got her tested and found out she was dyslexic and had Erlands. And I was like, what is this? How do I help her? But once we identified that together, I was able to learn what, once I learned the signs, I'm like, yeah, that is what she has, right? I figured that out. And then 2, I also reached out and asked questions. It's like, how do I support her? And then how do I advocate for her in the school that she's either going to be going to or the school she's currently in? Because I was like, she's not going to stay in this system. I wanted her in the school that my son was because he got accepted to a public charter school, and I wanted her there with him. And I fought for that.
And I think you just hit on the second thing that I would say, if I'm just capturing that, just because I feel like you're just providing all the fodder for, probably the things that I'm supposed to be articulating, but you're just saying it really well. I mean, the second thing that I think is really important, and I can sort of talk about one goal in a second and how what I'm about to say sort of situates into that. Find the right programming. Mm-hmm. So after you learn your kid, find the right school, find the right sets of programming, because that's what you're describing. I needed to find a place and a set of supports that were going to support, them holistically. Right. But you can't, to your point, you can't identify that if you don't actually know them, know what their unique strengths are, maybe what some of their challenges are. And so anyway, I was just like, oh, you're like naming all the things that I would have said.
Well, I mean, I walked through all of this stuff, and this is what I teach parents here in Houston, is try to, engage with them and tell them, look, I've been in your shoes. No, I didn't go to college to learn this stuff. I picked this up because everything I had to do for my kid, but I want everybody else to know that secret sauce, right? And this is what we talked about before. And a lot of things that I picked up, in the schools, the different, because both my kids, I had my oldest kids in a traditional school, the neighborhood school, and then I had my youngest in a public charter school. I had to learn a lot about the school system. And I know me and you just recently talked about school finance. And before we get into one goal, that was one thing I wanted to bring about, because this is something that everyone needs to know, which is a monster to understand here in Texas, is about the ESSER funding. A lot of people are like, what is that? And, what does that mean? And, how does it help my kid, or how does it help school? So can you kind of talk about that? And then we'll go into how that ties into everything else we're going to talk about.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I am a firm believer, let me say sort of my philosophical understanding, and then I can actually say that the brass tacks of what we know is no money, no mission, no mission, no money. Meaning you actually need resources to deliver the things. As an educator, you need resources, because resources afford you time, talent, and just additional treasure that allow you to promulgate whatever you are trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And so what I like about ESSER, which essentially ESSER is the origin of the story is the Biden administration, as they were in the first 90 days shaping up how they were going to sort of backfill some really traumatic experiences that really all industries faced, but specifically in education. Mm-hmm. They thought of a plan to create what's called an ESSER fund, which is about $60 billion or something like that across the nation, to provide states to say, hey, we know that school districts had to come out of pocket unexpectedly and unnecessarily for lots of things related to COVID. I can give you 2 examples: PPE and technology. Right? Those are just literally 2 things, like not to mention all the other like access to the internet, right? Like all of the things that allowed kids to be able to access their education last year. And they were having to kind of pocket for that, right? Because it was so unexpected. And in educational sort of bureaucratic, like government budgets, it's not like you could just apply for money and it just rains down on you. Your budget is your budget.
Right.
And so what this administration did was say, we are going to create a fund that not only allows you to back pay some of what you paid for like the 2020 version of the pandemic and the 2021 version, but also how can you sort of disperse this money, billions of dollars? I can speak specifically about HISD in a moment. How can you disperse and really use this as a catalytic financial investment tool in the things that will not only help you overcome COVID, but thrive over it? Mm-hmm. So those things can be used for any of a district, like any district goals. So some districts have the goals of, I'll just mention like 3 that are pretty consistent across school districts. Pre-K education,
right?
Post-secondary education,
mm-hmm.
and social emotional health.
Right. That was a big one.
Right. And so, so like they're saying, we're going to give you enough money so you can pay back whatever you spent, the expenditures. And we're going to give you a sizable chunk of money to then say, we want to do this. We can't afford it. But actually now with ESSER, we can. Because there are other pots of money that districts use historically to fund those 3 ventures. So that could be anything from Title IX, Title I, right? Fundraising efforts locally. There are lots of different sort of strings to pull, and you could skin a cat multiple ways. And that's how they had been funding those efforts prior to ESSER. That funding will still be available, Wendy. So here's the benefit of this. ESSER will pour down money. You get to use that back end and forward. And you will not be absolved of securing Title IX, Title I, and those other fundings that come. But you can actually put it to the side to create more longevity for the programming versus sometimes you can like get a grant, bring in a program, but you don't have a financial plan to keep it. And so it booms and it busts. What ESSER will do is create like a mapping plan to say, actually, we're going to pay for the first 3 years of said thing. Or continue, or douse the money here. And then for all the money you sort of stored away, that can pay for the next 3 years. And so it's giving life and longevity to lots of programming that matters to school districts. So it comes from the federal government, and then it goes to states, and then states disperse that to districts, and then districts have the ability to disperse that to really whatever they deem necessary under the guidelines. The guidelines are very vague, which I love vague guidelines because I like to do that. My daughter, really funny, quick story. We were at a crafting shop on Saturday because she's a kinesthetic learner. She learns by like literally putting her hands on everything. And so rather than let that be diabolical, I'm trying to like make it, fruitful. So she loves designing and crafting. And the director was telling her, you have to move the brush horizontally. And she is rounding out the edges. And I said, well, the director said you have to move the brush back and forth. And she turns to me, she says, Mommy, I want to do it my way. I was like, oh, okay. Okay, fine. Like, how about you try it that way? We'll see how it turns out, right? Like at this, I'm happy she knows that about herself, right?
Right.
Where did she get that from?
I wonder.
So the guidelines are pretty vague, in which school districts can really sort of mold it and connect it to the guidelines without sort of being audited and finding that they have irregulated the money in some type of way. So HISD alone, they will receive something like $200 million.
Huh?
They will probably disperse about 25% of that on post-secondary efforts. Which is incredible. So we're looking at like $50 million over the course of the next couple of years to do some really amazing things, investing in programming that, will work equitably for kids.
And this is the reason why it's so important for parents to attend your child's school board meetings, because you learn about these, their budget. What are they using that for? Because you can find out with the ESSER what they're using, how they're going to be using it. And if it's something that you feel that, hey, I need to mention something, there's a program that I still want to have for our campus that helps my student, you can actually talk about that there. And that was one of the things that I learned as a parent, is really understanding how schools operate so that I can understand how to advocate for my child. And that's what we're going to learn a little bit about One Goal, because a lot of, what One Goal does is a lot what I learned on my own. I wish I would have known you guys were there when I was looking. And then learning about your mission. So tell us about One Goal and the mission.
Yeah. So let me tell you sort of a statistic, because we were sort of born out of this statistic. Okay. So in Chicago, our founding CEO, his name is Jeff Nelson. He has since stepped down, and we have an amazing new CEO. Her name is Melissa Connolly. But Jeff Nelson saw in the Chicago Tribune that this figurine illustration of like the bodies, right? And there were like 100. And it says something to the effect of, something like 95% of those bodies weren't filled in. So it basically said, if you are a student in the Chicago public school system, that your odds of completing college 6 years after high school graduation was something like, slim to maybe 5 to 10%. And that's where One Goal was born. And that's where, what you're doing, my child, my voice, it is, you see a problem and you step up to say, I'm going to create a thing that ensures success and equitable access. And that's what Jeff said. This is a national injustice. This is not fair. And so I'm going to do something about it. And he started an after school program that wasn't called One Goal yet. And after 2 years, he started, the official nonprofit called One Goal. So it was started in Chicago. And since then we have spread across the country, which is incredible, in the most high needs areas. And so Houston was the second expansion city, which is so funny because I am the second child. So I'm a twin, but I was born like 4 minutes before. It's not like astronomically more time, right?
Oh, I didn't know you were a twin. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a fraternal twin. And so I'm technically like the second born, and my older sister is like this force to be reckoned with. And so she had this like amazing reputation, and I got the reputation of her little sister. And I remember being like, I got to a point where I was like 10 years old. I was like, I'm Patty. I'm not her little sister. I wanted to create my own identity. I feel like that's what I did at One Goal too. I was like, we are not Chicago. We are Houston. And so we are in Houston, and then we expanded to New York, and then Boston, Atlanta, and then the Bay Area. So we are in some of the cities that have really, really critical degree divides, because our ultimate mission is to ensure every young student has an equitable opportunity to access their post-secondary dreams. And what that means is we have to close the degree divide in America. So in our local regions, we have to close the degree divide in our cities. So the degree divide in Houston is that in HISD specifically, this is from a lot of data from the Rice Center, or Rice University Data Center, and Kinder produces a lot of these data information. And if everybody kind of knows a little bit of background, HISD is Houston Independent School District. For those of you that are not from Houston, and Rice University and Kinder work together to do a lot of data work when it comes to education. So that's what she's referring to. Sorry, I had to mention that because some people are like, what? Like I should be speaking and like, everybody here is from Houston. And so they produced a data set saying that if a student identifies with a low socioeconomic status, which that group comprises about at least 60% of Houston's youth, that if you are identified that way, then you have about a 20% chance of completing college 6 years after high school.
Oh, wow.
As opposed to about 67% of your peers who were born into the middle class or with more wealth, essentially. So we're looking at 20% and 67%. So wherever you see One Goal, it is because there is a stark degree divide. Right. And so we came to Houston because those results mirrored some of the devastating results that, Jeff saw in Chicago. And so what we do is we exist to close that divide. So my whole job is to make sure that number goes up. Right. And so the way that we do that is that we are college success, and we are a late intervention program that ensures enrollment, persistence, and completion.
And so as a parent, I need to know how you walk that step. Like you could say that, and it's like, how does that, because I'm visual, so you got to walk through me. How does that help my student?
Yes. So what we do is, and I can sort of outline the programming and then go back and say, if you are a parent, this is how you can sort of, help navigate the programming, make sure that your kid has access. So we start recruiting students by way of partnering with school districts and campuses to assess if there is a need and a want. So what we don't do is we do not assume, right? We do not impose, we don't boulder, we don't push. We do not presume that we are like the best thing smoking. That is not who we are. We exist to be partners and co-power to transform, but we only want to do that if we can see a real need and a real opportunity for partnership. So I say that genuinely to say, we speak with school directors and ask them, what is your vision for high schools? What is your vision for college access? How many of your students do you want to complete college? How many do you want to enroll? What's your vision? And can our services support your vision? Right. So we literally send a team of our folks across the city of Houston to find these opportunities. So once we do that, we then partner with the school. They support partnership. So here's 3 unique qualifiers and what makes, one goal Houston, and I think separate from the rest. We are an in-school model. And so what that means is that we operate within a school day. So I was a student athlete. I was also a Division I student athlete. And I when I think back, I'm like, I kicked a bunch of things out of the way so that I could be a student athlete. And right. So what we try to do is, particularly within a high school realm, not make us compete for students' time. We know that the things that they choose after school are oftentimes create just as much fulfillment as the things in school. Also, we know that our demographic of kids need daily, consistent instruction. And so what this functions as is a college seminar class that you don't have to go to an SAT prep on Saturday or have your parents drive you. I'm like, oh my gosh, the amount of activities I do with my kids is like, I feel like I'm just taxi.
Exactly, right?
Parenting. And we don't make kids compete that way. So we are an in-school model where you have a teacher and a dedicated class time that allows you to traverse, and this is the second point, 3 years of intentional support. So we support students from the first day of junior year, senior year, to the first day of the second year in whatever pathway you've chosen, whether that's 2-year, 4-year, or workforce development. We believe that there's one goal, but we also believe that there are many paths to that one goal. So our job is not to capitulate you into a specific arena, but it is to make sure that we are exposing you to understanding what that choice could yield, right? Wow. And so the third thing that's really important, and I'll talk more about that second point in just a moment, which I think is really important about who we are. But the third thing is that we only support students who have a C average, which I love. Because those are the students by junior year, they have maybe ruled themselves out. They probably said, I'm going to go to college. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know how you get there. I want to get there. I just don't know. Or I'll be fine. Or I have really big dreams, but I'm really intimidated about pursuing it because the college access system is really hard to navigate.
Right.
So we want the kids who often feel overlooked, who the system has already ruled them out for the possibility of their future, or they just have not been able to access the right programming on their campuses. The college advising ratio, Wendy, in Houston, is it Houston or Texas? I think it's Houston, is 500 students to 1 counselor.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
so you're talking about like kids are probably getting like 10 minutes of advising, right? About what they're going to do and how they can access their future when they leave the walls of the high school. So One Goal says that's not enough. You actually deserve 50 minutes a day. That's how important your future is. And we're going to invest in that. And so we support C-level students for 3 years in school every day to say college access is just as important as your AP bio class. It's just as important as your English class. It is important. So with those unique qualifiers, we go into places and say, can we partner with you to support your ultimate aim? So far, excuse me, we've been able to partner with about 4 school districts in the Houston area, 4 large comprehensive school districts. We support about 2,500 students. We've grown tremendously over the last 7 years since I've been there. And really our goal is to continue to grow while differentiating our services to make sure that we can meet students' needs year over year as they change. We have to serve thousands more kids in order to close that divide, just period. We have to do it well, and we have to do more of it.
And I think my next question is, how is a parent involvement with the one goal? And it's like, because I could tell you this, in National Parents Union survey, a recent survey that we just put out, is saying that 64% of parents are more involved than ever in their child's education since, COVID has hit. So I'm curious to know, how is One Goal working with parents when it comes to this?
Yeah. So our teachers are the primary drivers of our programming, which is intentional because we feel like they are best positioned with the relationships and the connected tissue on a campus and with families to be able to drive that work. And so we ask our teachers to directly connect with parents, particularly during the recruitment process. We want to make sure that we are getting parents permission. I think about this all the time as a parent. I'm like, hey, school, I'm trusting you to do the right thing for my kid.
Right.
That means I'm also paying for you to do the right thing for my kid. It's called property taxes.
Right. You see, a lot of people don't know that. It's like, hey.
Yeah. And so I, as an executive director, I stay committed to that and say it is our job to understand what parents want and to deliver on the promise that we said we would for their kids. And so in the recruitment process, we are very entrenched in the relationships with students via our teachers. So our staff plays a support role and a training role, right? Mm-hmm. Because we want to situate teachers as the driving force. And so in the recruitment process and then throughout our programming. So for example, in the first year of our program, it's all about achievement, which is increasing your GPA and your SAT and building your sense of self. Yeah.
I like that.
What we saw, and you and I have worked for an incredible charter network that allowed for lots of students to enroll. And when we were there, it was like 100% enrollment rate. It was incredible and breaking boundaries and shattering all expectations of, what people assumed. What we also saw, and this was a national trend, it wasn't specific to that charter network, but we also saw students come home. Right. We also saw students come home in their second semester or their first semester of their first year. And it was often what I heard even at Yes Prep, but I also heard more at One Goal was, I don't belong, which is, as a mom, is crushing. Right. And as a parent,
it is crushing to hear that.
It's crushing because we spend so much time as parents saying we believe in you, like we want you to succeed. And we hope that wherever they go, other people are instilling that deep belief that who you are matters enough to say you belong here. But that isn't often our kids' experience, and particularly our kids who identify as Black or brown, because institutions are often not designing the culture that says your culture matters, your desires matter, and your access points matter. And so I would see kids go off to some of the best universities in the nation. And as soon as they would find a setback, it wasn't because they couldn't academically bounce back, but it was because of that social belonging. So our curriculum helps students identify their authenticity. We call it culturally responsive pedagogy. And it is literally designed to say, who are you? Who is your family? And why does that matter? Excuse me.
That's okay. We have allergies here in Houston. And so I think it's
crazy town.
It's One Goal does have that 3-year program for students. Are parents involved in that program? And is there a cost for a student to be involved in the program with One Goal?
So there is no cost. It is free to families. There is a cost to your school. But because of ESSER funding and because of funding called CCMR, which is provided to the state for every student who enrolls, they get a kickback of about $3,000 to $5,000, which allows them to pay for programming that doesn't touch their bottom line. So it is no cost to a parent. What we do want is your time. And so if we go back to that first year, kids will be coming home a lot with new ideas. They will want to talk to you. They will want to process their experiences. They will have many, many light bulbs that go off and say, I learned this about myself. I'm confused about this. I think I want this. So what we ask for is your commitment in time and your commitment in your belief. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds kind of fluffy, Wendy, but like it is real. Like I intentionally talk to my son about what he's learned and what life lessons. And I know that that's going to matter in how he makes decisions, because he's going to know that I approve of something or not. He's already started asking me about going away to school. And I think he's asking me because he's saying, are you going to be nervous if I do? And what I told him is that I'm not. Mm-hmm. And so let's look at some schools. Let's see the demographics. Tell me what you like about the school. We need that from our parents, right? Mm-hmm. We need the co-counsel, the co-advising. We need their support at home. We need them to create a space where processing and learning and developing into a new person is safe. Because your child will likely be at the beginning of their one goal journey very different than at the end of their one goal journey.
That is very true. And my other question would be, as a parent, is how does a student stay on track, from high school to college, and what tools and resources do you provide those students? And does the parent also are able to track that along with them? Or
yes. With you? Yeah, that's great. So how do you stay on track? So in the One Goal program, I'm going to sort of outline the headline of all 3 years, and then what tools we use, and then how we bring in, parents or invite parents into that space. So the first year is about achievement and identity. The second mm-hmm. year, you leave your first year with a list of colleges that you have researched that sort of match your academic profile. You spend your senior year analyzing them and applying to them so that you can get a financial aid package that you can assess. This is where it's so important. So we have our teachers create parent nights and invite, parents in to have one-on-one conversations. So what I would say is whenever that happens, I know in middle school and in high school, we tend to be a little bit more hands-off as parents. And I would counter that and say, get in, because teachers want to talk to you, particularly about the long-term collegiate decisions that students have to make. So for example, students are assessing their financial aid packaging against their family's financial viability and what their family believes about them.
Right.
So for example, we had a young lady, beautiful young lady. She's a first generation college student, but her parents were educated in a different country. And so she signed up for One Goal because she wanted to understand how to navigate an American system. And I just thought that was brilliant. I was like, I didn't know that at 17. I was like, that is such an articulate statement. And she wanted to go to Texas A&M. She has a sister who's 2 years older than her, who got accepted and who was there. And her parents were paying for their tuition. COVID hits, her parents lose their job. Oh. She gets put on a waiting list prior to COVID, and then later gets accepted. But her parents had no financial means to pay for it. And so she was going to have to take out, $25,000, $30,000 a year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And what One Goal does in tandem, our staff, teacher that supports them, and parents, is we get together and we say, so what now what? And so with this young lady, we had the ability to help her have a conversation with her parents and bring the parents into the conversation to say, what does this mean for you and what do you want? Long story short, she got a full ride to U of H main campus. And although Texas A&M was her dream school, she went to University of Houston main campus.
It's so similar because that's basically what happened to my son, because he's first generation college, student. When he got accepted to different colleges, But there was one that, the Iowa State University was his first one that actually says, they're giving him a full ride. But he's like, that's not where I want to go. I want to go to this school, just like the young lady you were talking about. Because our kids get stuck on that's the school I want to go to.
Yeah.
And this is where I tell parents all the time, it's like, yes, you can have that conversation with your child until you turn blue in your face, right? But I had to figure out and maneuver, who is my son close to on the school side, right? And it was his principal. He really had a good relationship with his principal at the time. And Mr. Golden was one that, I went to him and I asked him, can you please talk to my son? Because he is up in the air about the college he wants to go to. He has a full ride and we're like, go. And he was still questioning no. So Mr. Golden sat and talked with him, had that, what I call come to Jesus, look, kid, he goes,
right.
Because he had a 5-year plan. He wanted to get his bachelor's degree and then his master's degree. That was his plan in the beginning. Mr. Golden told him, he's like, you got a full ride for your bachelor's degree. Take that where you don't have to have anything out of pocket for you. Then figure out how to get that money for that master's degree that 5th year. He goes, I'm still paying on mine. And he goes, do you want to have that, for your 4-year when you don't have to worry about your 4-year, And these are where the conversations with parents come along too, because I know a lot of parents that I talk to here in Houston, especially Latino families, they would say, well, I'm kind of worried that my kid's going out of state. And it's like, you got to have that conversation with them and realize that they can help better for the family once they get that degree, and they can come home and help even more.
And I just want to underscore a couple of things you said. So, because I tell you, you're writing this whole script, by the way. I thought you invited me, Wendy, to share some knowledge. I feel like you're saying all the knowledge. I'm just repeating it. You just said something really incredible, which is, what does that conversation sound like? And how can you be a part of being an advocate in it? Right? And so I couldn't agree more. And so on our end, we use the teacher as that additional voice, right? Outside of the parent to help sort of be the Mr. Golden, to sort of steward that conversation, to give an alternative perspective. The other thing that's really important is to not, and I struggle with this as a parent, not imposing my own fears onto their process, particularly ones that are unknown for me. So the tech field, it just seems volatile. It's like one day the stock is up, then it's down, and things are new, and then they're not. And I don't know what longevity looks like in that arena. And so I know that I impose some of that fear on, my son when he is talking to me. He's so inspired by it. And I have to minimize that and say, what inspires you? And sort of try to get his excitement to pour into me. But I think the things you look for in that process. So what tools do we use? We use something called a My Options tool that students have access to, that their parents can see and can also weigh into. My Options are essentially naming the options that are at your disposal. And the tool will tell you, Wendy, your chance of graduation based on your SAT and your
That's awesome.
ACT score, your GPA, traditionally of your gender and your ethnic background. What is the rate of completion at that university based on that? So this tool gives you the ability for you and your parents to say, is this the right school for me? Then once you get your financial aid package back, we help our students sit down and have conversations with their parents. For example, one of the things that we advise is for students not to take out more than $5,000 of loans per year.
Right.
Because data shows us that students who are accessing the middle class and trying to access social mobility for the first time, paying off more than about $30,000 to at max $50,000 worth of loans can be insurmountable.
Right.
So we take the lower end of that and we say, try to only accumulate about $20,000. So we try to empower and equip parents to sort of have that knowledge so that when they're supporting their child, they can say, hey, this is going to be too much. and I don't want you to be saddled with loans. Let's look at a different opportunity. So I think it's the knowledge that we equipped our parents with and our stakeholders so that they can be a part of that analysis process.
So I'm just curious to know, because I know when I first started this, I had so many questions, right? And you just, reminded me of something. Do you walk with the parent when it comes, because that financial aid package, and I'm going to tell everybody here, that financial aid package is so confusing. It's like, wait a minute. It says you got a full ride, but I still got to pay this. But wait a minute. Then it goes down to the next 3 years. And then it's like, do you explain that financial aid package to parents to let them realize, okay, here's where you come in. Here's where we want you to help with your child when it comes to the financial aid piece, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is what's going to be coming out of pocket. Here's what the school's paying. So do y'all really walk that with the parents? And also, if a parent doesn't speak English, do you help them translate that in another language?
So I would say Beauty and the Beast. So the beautiful thing is we typically support our school districts and our campuses with FAFSA night, which is sort of the beginning of that financial process, right? Because then once it's complete, you can, you have some understanding of your family's what's called EFC, which is your family's estimated family contribution. All right.
That's what I can remember, EFC. That is a big thing for everybody to remember.
Yeah, I know it is. Because it's basically like the bill. Right?
Exactly. That is your bill. How does this work into your financial plan? And that's what I was talking about. Like, how do you explain that to parents? Because I know I was fortunate enough because I was currently in college when my son was going off to college. So I was familiar with that process. But I always thought of parents that didn't have that knowledge. Like, how are you educating them on that piece? Because that is a little monster in itself.
Yeah, it is. Our team is really sophisticated. So at one point, about 70 to 80% of our team had worked at post-secondary institutions. And so they were really sort of socialized and experts in like, what is this experience going to look like once they're here? And they understood every point of entry and completion to like get there. And so we would have that part of our team advise, parents and counselors, particularly on the FAFSA night, to shrink the information. To your point, it's a lot, it's too much. Like, this is my profession and it's too much, right? And so we would have them say, here are the top 5 things that parents should know. And one of them is exactly what you just said. The first thing is like, what information is most pertinent to have students complete FAFSA, right? It's like, we got to get it filled out. So that's step 1. Step 2 is, how do you understand it, right? And that's where all the sort of vocabulary comes in, and we have our team help parents understand that. So I would say our team sort of makes it really understandable and digestible, which honestly is how I'm able to like communicate it here, right? Because it can be a lot. The other challenge is that we have students who are undocumented.
Now it was a big thing here. It still is here in Houston because where we're at in Texas. So that is something that's good to know, especially the parents that have students who are undocumented.
So that process is just clunkier, is the way I would describe it.
Right.
Instead of completing FAFSA, they have to complete TASFA, which is a sort of extensive application. It's probably 3 times the size of it, and it's pretty antiquated in its forms. And so you have to provide a lot more information. It takes a lot longer. And quite frankly, emotionally, it can feel very intimidating.
Yeah, it does. I remember I had to walk through parents and students through that.
And then I think if we're saying like the things that you should remember, if your student has an undocumented status, what's important to remember is that funding is a pot, and once it's gone, it's gone. That is the unfortunate part, which is very different than if a student has citizenship and they apply for financial aid. They will get financial aid based on their family's, financial background, because it's not an endless fund, but it's enough. Very different than if students are undocumented. It is a large pot, and it really is on a first come, first serve. And because that process is so clunky, it can feel like it can take you forever. But funding in TASFA's funding is not as readily accessible as students who have citizenship. So I'm happy you brought that up, because so what I would advise is like, as soon as FAFSA opens, which is October 1st, every year, October 1st, every year. Okay.
That date I always had in my calendar and all my reminders.
Get her done, get her done as soon as possible, whether you have citizenship or not, just get it done so that you can figure all these things out. However, so that's the beautiful thing. So our team does a lot of counsel, co-counsel, and preparation in districts, on campuses with families. We do FAFSA nights all the time. We've done FAFSA Saturdays to accommodate for parents who maybe work late in evenings. So our team is incredibly inclusive in that way to say, we're going to fit ourselves around you all. However, we have very few staff members who are bilingual, and bilingual in meaning they could speak English and Spanish, not two other languages.
Right.
And that's something that we haven't really solved for. So that I want to be really transparent in saying we're actively seeking and staff members who can speak English and Spanish fluently, so that we can make ourselves a more viable service versus leaning on one or two staff members, right? The person in the field all the time. So that's the beast of it, is that we often struggle with recruiting people who have those skill sets.
And I think the next question, because I know Vicky, who's watching right now, she's like, where are you located? But how does a parent bring one goal to their child's school?
Yes. Okay. I love this question, because what I would say is the first thing is contact me. Okay. So Wendy's going to put some information up. It's my email address. So please take a snapshot, a picture of that with your phone, email me, because how this works, the most tangible and impactful lever to pull is a parent's interest and student's interest. So if you are wanting to bring a one goal to your school, then I would say contact me. And what we would do is we would have a conversation. Where is your student at school? Does one goal currently exist? Did we exist before? Because what we ultimately want to do is we want to co-power with you. We want to go into and set up a principal's office with you and your student to say, here's a parent, a community member that says that they want additional programming. And honestly, then you can pass it off to us and we'll dog hunt that thing from there. So we want to just do it. We want to do it together with you. And I have staff members who are in charge of partnering and creating stewardship and cultivation opportunities. So that's one avenue is reach out to me so that we can partner with you to understand what's happening with post-secondary in your school and in your district. And if one goal isn't there, then we can sort of start that process. And let me just, before I go on to the second option for that, for what you can do, let me sort of drill here why not just one goal, because I'm a competitive person, because, in sports, when you win, it's amazing, right? I love translating that into education, because when we win, kids win. But I don't want to compete against other post-secondary educational entities, because there's enough room for all of us to support as many kids as possible. So I say what I'm about to say in the spirit of very genuine. You want programming at your schools. You want programming in your district, because what we know at One Goal, we have a very sophisticated analytics database produced by our national team. What we know is that there aren't very many available seats for kids in general that provide more than a 50% completion rate for whatever institution they go to. Let me say that a little bit differently. For the majority of schools that kids are attending, it is a coin toss, literally 50% chance that they will complete in 4 to 6 years. That is abysmal. That percentage should be 85%. If kids are paying $20,000, $40,000, spending 4 years of time, that percentage should be, the ROI should be, I have a 90% chance of walking away with a degree, because the degree that a student does not get is the most expensive degree that they won't arrive at, which definitely hurts their ability for employment. So what we want to do is improve the odds for completion. the way that you improve odds in institutions whose completion rate for students is 50% is with programming.
Mm-hmm.
So when students have access to people and resources and platforms and technology and mentors, all the things, a suite of services, that odd turns from maybe 50% to maybe 85. So that's why I'm really advocating to say, no matter if it's one goal or not, I hope it's one goal, but I care more about kids. Advocate for programming, particularly in secondary, because it increases your kids' chance in completing, which is what we all want. So I needed to say that to just say, contact me, of course, but if it's not one goal, still do it.
Exactly. We need to advocate for our kids.
Still advocate for your kids, no matter what. Like, this is not sort of a salesmanship, no, really. Like, I care about kids, period. One goal is one of the many ways to get them to arrive at that goal. The second thing I would say is there are parent committees. Literally, sorry, I had to write this one down to remember. In Texas, it is mandatory for every school to have something called a site-based decision-making committee. This committee is comprised of community stakeholders, right? That committee is usually comprised of lots of parents. So it isn't the PTO. It's usually parents who are advocating for their children. And principals have to use that committee to make campus-wide decisions.
Did you hear that, parents in Texas? I hope y'all heard that part, because that was a very crucial piece that I didn't even know.
Yeah. I mean, Wendy, you said this earlier, or you've said this in a previous conversation, but the best way to make change is to get on the agenda, right? Yep. Like, support your kid, be in the throes, and once you arrive at this point, like when you are a part of changing the way a campus does things, right? Like you said, attend your school board meetings.
Yeah, school board meetings, that's the biggest piece.
Couldn't agree more. And so this committee is the way that, you can begin to advocate for your student and other students' needs. And there are principals who absolutely use this to say, here's my idea. You all tell me if this is right. You all see this way better than I can. These are your kids. And so that site-based decision-making committee is a crucial part of bringing one goal to your campus. And then the third way that I would say is if one goal exists at your campus already, then what we can do is we can expand. The way that we expand is that we typically interview or just connect with our students to make sure that we are clear on their experience, okay? Because we are not fools. We don't imagine that everybody has had the best experience, because sometimes we're human and we miss the boat. And so we want to know, have we delivered on the things that you trusted us with? If they are saying yes, what we hear from students is yes. Most of the time, we have really, really outstanding results. Our students enroll at about a 75 to 80% rate, which is about 20 to 30 percentage points higher than the citywide average. And about 75% of our students who enroll actually go on to their second year, which that percentage is about 20%. So I know I just threw a lot of numbers, but we have some amazing results for enrollment and persistence.
That is awesome to hear. And I think just to remind everybody, because I know Vicki was asking this question, you are in the Bay Area, Chicago, Massachusetts, Atlanta, and New York, right? And then Houston.
Yep.
So if those of you that are watching, they're from Texas, guess what? Those of you that are not from Texas, and if you heard that, one goal is there. Now, I don't know if they have that committee as well in those other states, but it's good to connect with somebody at one goal in your state to see if they have that, because that is something that I encourage everybody to do.
Yeah.
And join.
And you can go to the website. All the executive directors, our email addresses are on there. All of our staff are on there as well with their email addresses. And so we try to make ourselves as accessible as possible. If one goal exists at the school or if they don't, what we want to do is we want to connect with a student. And so if you are interested in the sort of the third option is, we want to put your student in front of their principal to say, I want this. I can, as a former principal, I can tell you that there is like, that just changes the game. It's like,
Exactly.
okay, let's work on this for sure. It feels very different than hearing it from an adult. I will say that for sure. So I say those are three ways. Connect with me for sure. If in Texas, if you can, jump on that site-based decision-making committee, or find our website, connect with any region where we exist, so that if we do exist or we don't, we can put you all essentially in purview of these stakeholders to bring one goal.
That is so awesome. I just love hearing about all this programming that, about one goal, what they're doing with students, working and, pairing with these parents, just like me. I mean, like I was saying, I wish I would have known you guys were around when I was first doing this, because it would have been made. But to be honest, I wouldn't know all the things that I know today if I haven't. And I'm so excited that you guys exist for parents, because they need to know all this stuff to be prepared and how to support, whether it be a career field for their student or whether it be a college path. It's something that we need to know. Each of our kids are own individuals, and we know our kids best. We are the best, advocates for our kids. We're the ones that need to fight and ask those questions with the school districts to know I'm here for my child, and how to do that. And I think it's great that y'all work side by side with these students with the tools and resources to help them get to where they have, a good path that we want as parents for our kids.
Yeah.
So everybody,
thank you for that.
I want to thank Patty. We're running out of time here. I know I can keep going on this conversation. And I think Vicky had a comment. She says, my grandson attends school in Metro Atlanta. So guess what? There's an Atlanta one goal. So reach the one goal, representative there. I just put all of the information that we talked about, their website, Patty's email address. If you are in Texas, you can reach out to her. I put all this in the comment field and also on the description field so that you can reach out to them so that they can help you learn. And then if they're not in your city, guess what? Talk to them still anyways to see if they can get one in your city itself. Thank you again, Patty. I just have one announcement to make before we go. Patty, you're welcome to stay on, or you're welcome to log off with us. But here at the Parent Connection, I just want to remind everybody, as we return to some normalcy here, as we're facing yet another challenge with post-COVID anxiety, come join National Parents Union tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay. I'm saying that because I know I have some other parents from Massachusetts that are watching. For the Pandemic Anxiety Together We Heal Forum that we're having. Wow. We'll be discussing ways to make your return to either work, school, or society. It's going to be a really lively conversation. Kimberly Holiday is going to be interacting in this and then helping you how to communicate with the community. National Parents Union is sponsoring this beautiful event with International Care by giving away, and I'm going to say this, 10 spa days in a box set. So if you register, you might be able to get one of those box sets here. I know I'm registered. I'm going to put this registration. You do require to register. It is virtual, so you don't have to worry about coming in person. I hope that you get to join us in this event. I think it's something that we all need right now with everything going on, on that piece. And also, families, you have the power to change the conversation on politics around education reform and innovation. Join the parent, revolution. Become a delegate for the National Parents Union, just like me. I'm the Texas delegate. We are looking for delegates all across our nation. If you are interested, email me. My information is on here as well on the header and the comments. But you also can mention Tashfir. She's our director that can also help you as well. I'm going to put it on here in a second. Here we go. That's her email address. You can send her your resume. And if you want more information on how to become a delegate for the National Parents Union, she'll be happy to help you, as well as me too, if you would like to contact me. And then also, I encourage everybody to come and become a member of the National Parents Union so you can learn more information about this, because we are making changes. We are disrupting the system because we need to fight for our kids more. Visit our National Parents Union website. You can become a member there. It's a 1, 2, 3 process, just as simple as that. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you, Patty, for joining. Everybody, thanks for the great questions. Y'all have a good night. Stay safe. Stay happy. See y'all and catch y'all the next time on the Parent Connection Show. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.